Hey everyone! Welcome back to Everyday English. I'm Chris, your host.
And I'm Lena.
Are you ready to dive into today's topic?
Absolutely, Chris. Let's get started.
Topic 1. Why going to work feels like a battle.
Okay, be honest. Have you ever stared at your screen, rereading an email 10 times just to make sure it doesn't sound too aggressive? Or maybe your heart starts racing before a meeting, and suddenly, even saying good morning feels like a high-stakes social experiment. If that sounds familiar, don't worry. You're not alone. Workplace anxiety is real, and guess what? Over 40% of young professionals feel it too. So, what's really making work feel like a daily battle? And more importantly, how do we beat the stress without quitting our jobs and moving to the mountains? Stick around, because today we're breaking it all down. Why workplace anxiety happens, the sneaky ways it affects us, and the game-changing strategies to feel more confident at work.
Well, that's such a striking statistic. And honestly, it explains so much about why I spent 15 minutes this morning debating whether my email sign-off sounded too aggressive.
You know what's fascinating about that? Research shows we spend an average of 28% of our work week just managing emails, and a significant portion of that time is spent agonizing over tone and wording.
That actually makes me feel better about the time I spent last week crafting the perfect, as per my previous email message, that wouldn't sound passive-aggressive.
The psychology behind workplace communication anxiety is really interesting. Studies show that digital communication lacks the nonverbal cues that make up 93% of our in-person interactions.
So you're telling me that when I'm overthinking every punctuation mark, I'm actually trying to compensate for all those missing social signals?
Exactly right. And here's where it gets even more interesting. A recent workplace behavior study found that people spend an average of 47 minutes per day just worrying about past or future workplace interactions.
Well, that definitely explains why the break room feels like a social minefield sometimes, like when you've already said good morning to someone and then keep running into them throughout the day.
Speaking of workplace social dynamics, let's talk about meetings, which, according to recent surveys, are the #1 trigger for workplace anxiety among professionals under 40.
Oh my goodness, yes, the whole ritual of it. Wondering when to speak up, worrying about interrupting someone, trying to sound intelligent but not show-offy.
Here's something that might surprise you. Neuroscience research shows that the brain processes the threat of public speaking in meetings the same way it processes physical danger. We're literally in fight-or-flight mode.
That explains why my heart races before every presentation, even though logically, I know my coworkers aren't actually going to attack me for messing up a PowerPoint slide.
And get this. A study from Harvard Business School found that the fear of negative evaluation in workplace settings actually impairs cognitive performance by up to 30%.
Well, that's just great. We're literally making ourselves worse at our jobs by worrying about being bad at our jobs.
But here's where we can turn things around. Research in organizational psychology has identified several practical strategies that can significantly reduce workplace anxiety.
Please tell me one of them isn't just breathe deeply and imagine everyone in their underwear, because I've tried that and it only makes things more awkward.
Actually, much more practical than that. The first strategy involves something called cognitive reframing. Instead of thinking, I have to give this presentation, you think, I get to share my expertise.
That's interesting. So it's like shifting from viewing work as a performance to viewing it as a contribution?
Precisely. And studies show this simple mindset shift can reduce anxiety symptoms by up to 63% in workplace situations. It's about moving from a judgment-focused mindset to a value-focused one.
Well, that makes me think about all those times I've stayed quiet in meetings because I was worried about saying something wrong.
The data on that is fascinating too. A survey of Fortune 500 companies found that 67% of good ideas come from employees who initially hesitated to share them due to anxiety.
So we're literally holding back innovation because we're too worried about judgment. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
And here's another surprising finding. Teams with members who openly discuss their work-related anxieties actually perform 23% better than teams that maintain a everything's fine facade.
That really challenges the whole fake it till you make it approach we've been taught, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The research suggests that authenticity and vulnerability in the workplace actually build stronger professional relationships and lead to better outcomes.
So what you're saying is that all this time we've been trying to hide our workplace anxiety, we could have been using it as a strength.
Exactly. And here's a practical example. Some companies are now implementing anxiety-aware management practices, which have resulted in a 34% decrease in workplace stress levels.
What does that actually look like in practice? Because I'm having trouble imagining my boss wanting to hear about my email-related existential crises.
Well, it includes things like normalized break-taking, flexible communication preferences, and structured feedback systems. Companies using these approaches report up to 28% higher employee retention rates.
That makes so much sense. It's like creating an environment where we don't have to pretend we're robots who never get stressed or overwhelmed.
And the economic impact is significant. Workplace anxiety costs U.S. businesses approximately $40 billion annually in lost productivity and healthcare costs.
That really puts it in perspective. We're not just talking about individual comfort. This is affecting the entire economy.
And looking toward the future, experts predict that addressing workplace anxiety will become one of the key factors in company success, especially with younger generations entering the workforce.
Well, that gives me hope that maybe the next generation won't have to spend quite so much time stress crafting their email signatures.
The key takeaway from all this research is that workplace anxiety isn't just a personal issue. It's a systemic challenge that requires systemic solutions.
And it sounds like acknowledging the problem is actually the first step towards solving it, both personally and organizationally.
That's right. By understanding that workplace anxiety is a shared experience, we can start building more supportive, productive, and ultimately more human work environments.
Topic 2. The power of saying no. How it can change your life.
Quick question. Why does saying no feel so uncomfortable? Like, why do we say yes to things we don't even want to do? Well, here's a wild fact. Saying no actually activates the same part of the brain as physical pain. Yep, our brains literally think we're getting hurt just by rejecting a request. But guess what? Learning to say no is actually a superpower that can change your life. Stick around, because today we're diving into why setting boundaries is your secret weapon for success and happiness.
That's fascinating. Just yesterday, I found myself agreeing to 3 different commitments I didn't want to make.
Well, you're definitely not alone. Research from Harvard Business School found that the average professional says yes to about 70% of requests they receive, even when they'd prefer to decline.
Those numbers are staggering. What's driving this constant need to say yes?
You know, it's actually rooted in our evolutionary past. Anthropologists have found that in early human societies, being rejected from the group could mean death. So we developed this intense drive to be agreeable, just to survive.
So we're basically running ancient software in a modern world. That explains why saying no feels so threatening even when the stakes are actually pretty low.
Exactly right. And here's what's really interesting. Studies show that people who set clear boundaries and say no when necessary actually command more respect in both professional and personal relationships.
That's so counterintuitive. We say yes thinking it'll make people like us more, but it might be having the opposite effect.
Well, think about it this way. Warren Buffett once said that the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. They understand that time is their most valuable resource.
Oh, that reminds me of a study I read about time management. Researchers found that people who regularly say no to non-essential commitments report 40% higher productivity and 50% lower stress levels.
Those numbers are compelling. And here's another surprising finding. When researchers tracked people's emotional responses to saying no, they found that while the initial discomfort lasted about 8 minutes on average, the relief of avoiding an unwanted commitment lasted for hours or even days.
Well, that puts things in perspective. 8 minutes of discomfort versus potentially days of regret.
Right. And there's more. A workplace study showed that employees who maintained clear boundaries were 34% less likely to experience burnout and 27% more likely to receive positive performance reviews.
So by trying to please everyone, we might actually be undermining our own success. What are some practical strategies for saying no effectively?
The research points to something called the pause, reflect, respond method. Instead of immediately saying yes, take 24 hours to consider if the request aligns with your priorities. Studies show this simple delay reduces impulsive commitments by over 60%.
That makes so much sense. It gives you time to get past that initial people-pleasing impulse.
Exactly. And here's another powerful technique, the positive no. Instead of apologizing, frame your no in terms of what you're choosing to prioritize. For example, I'm focusing on family time this weekend, rather than, I can't help with the project.
You know, I've noticed that over-apologizing can actually make the other person feel more awkward about the situation.
That's backed by research too. A study in organizational behavior found that excessive apologies can actually diminish your perceived competence and authority. Simple, direct no's were rated as more professional and respectful.
Speaking of respect, how do you handle saying no in high-stakes situations, like with your boss or important clients?
Well, here's an interesting approach supported by workplace psychology. Frame your no in terms of protecting quality and results. For instance, to maintain the high standard of work on our current projects, I need to decline additional commitments right now.
That's clever. It shows you're thinking about the bigger picture, not just your own convenience.
Right, and data shows this approach is highly effective. Managers reported being 75% more likely to accept and respect a no when it was framed in terms of maintaining quality versus personal reasons.
And I imagine this kind of boundary setting gets easier with practice.
Absolutely. Neuroscience confirms this. Each time you successfully say no, you're actually rewiring your brain's reward pathways. After about 2 to 3 months of consistent boundary setting, most people report a significant decrease in people-pleasing anxiety.
That's encouraging. Any final thoughts on making this shift?
Well, consider this. The average person will say yes to over 100,000 unnecessary commitments in their lifetime. Each time you say no to something that doesn't serve your goals, you're saying yes to what truly matters. Start small, be consistent, and remember, your time and energy are finite resources worth protecting.
That really puts things in perspective. Thank you for this enlightening conversation about the power of no.
And remember everyone, saying no isn't just about declining requests, it's about making space for your best yes.
Topic 3. What would happen if you quit social media for 30 days?
Imagine this. You check your screen time and realize you've spent over 2.5 hours today just scrolling. That's almost 40 full days a year lost to endless feeds. But what if you unplugged for a month? What happens to your brain, your focus, your life? Let's find out.
That statistic is mind-blowing when you think about it. 38 whole days we could spend doing, well, almost anything else.
And here's what's fascinating. Studies show our brains release dopamine with every notification, creating the same reward pathways as gambling or addictive substances.
So you're telling me we're basically walking around with slot machines in our pockets? That explains so much about why it's so hard to put down.
Exactly right. And when people attempt this 30-day digital detox, the first 72 hours often mirror actual withdrawal symptoms. Their hands get fidgety, anxiety spikes, and some even report feeling phantom phone vibrations.
That's actually pretty concerning when you frame it that way. What keeps anyone going past those first few days?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Around day 7, something remarkable starts happening. The brain's dopamine pathways begin to reset, and people report experiencing what researchers call digital clarity.
Tell me more about this digital clarity. What does that actually look like in real life?
Picture this. You're standing in line for coffee, and instead of mindlessly scrolling, you notice the barista's intricate tattoo, overhear an interesting conversation, or simply let your mind wander creatively. People report feeling like they're experiencing the world in high definition for the first time in years.
That's such a powerful image. But what about staying connected? We rely on these platforms for so much now.
Here's the surprising part. Studies show that people who quit social media actually report feeling more connected, not less. Instead of maintaining surface-level connections through likes and comments, they're having meaningful conversations and deeper interactions.
But surely there must be some real downsides to this experiment.
Oh, absolutely. Research shows about 67% of people who attempt the challenge struggle with FOMO in the first week. But here's the twist. By week 2, many report experiencing what psychologists now call JOMO, the joy of missing out.
That's fascinating. How does that psychological shift happen?
It's connected to something called the comparison effect. When we're constantly exposed to curated highlights of others' lives, our brains are in a perpetual state of social comparison. Remove that, and people report a 40% decrease in anxiety levels within just 2 weeks.
Those numbers are pretty compelling. What about productivity? I imagine that changes significantly.
The data here is striking. Participants in digital detox studies report gaining an average of 2.5 productive hours per day. That's a whole extra workday every week just from cutting out social media.
So what happens when people complete the 30 days? Do they just dive right back in?
Here's where it gets really interesting. About 80% of people who complete the challenge don't return to their previous usage patterns. Many adopt what researchers call a digital minimalism approach, using social media as a tool rather than a default time filler.
How do they maintain that balance long term?
Most successful participants establish what's called the 20-20-20 rule, checking social media no more than 20 minutes, twice a day, and never within 20 minutes of waking up or going to bed. This approach is shown to reduce anxiety while maintaining social connectivity.
That sounds like a much more sustainable approach than complete abstinence.
And the long-term benefits are significant. Studies show people who maintain reduced social media usage report 45% better sleep quality, 38% improved face-to-face relationships, and a 42% increase in overall life satisfaction.
Those are some pretty compelling statistics. What would you say to someone who's thinking about trying this?
Well, research suggests starting with a 24-hour trial period first. It's like dipping your toe in the water instead of diving into the deep end. About 92% of people who successfully complete a month-long detox started with these micro-detoxes first.
That makes it feel much more approachable. Any final thoughts on the future of our relationship with social media?
Looking ahead, experts predict we're entering what they call the digital consciousness era, where people are becoming more intentional about their online engagement. It's not about completely disconnecting. It's about reclaiming our attention and using these tools to enhance our lives rather than control them.
That's such a powerful way to frame it. Taking back control of our digital lives rather than letting them control us.
Exactly. And maybe that's the real challenge here. Not just surviving 30 days without social media, but fundamentally changing how we interact with these powerful tools that have become such a significant part of our lives.
Topic 4. Is AI coming for your job? The truth you need to hear.
The robots aren't just coming for our jobs, they're already here. Studies show AI will automate 30% of workplace tasks by 2030, but here's why that might actually be the best news you'll hear today.
Well, that's a bold statement. What makes you so optimistic about something that has most people worried about their job security?
Let me share something fascinating about what happened with ATMs. Everyone thought bank tellers would disappear completely, but instead, their roles evolved into something more valuable: financial advisors and relationship managers.
That's interesting, but surely some jobs are more vulnerable than others. What's the real picture looking like?
Here's the breakdown. Jobs with repetitive tasks are definitely changing. Data entry, basic customer service, routine manufacturing, these roles are seeing the biggest impact. But for every job being automated, we're seeing 3 new types of positions emerge.
What kinds of new positions are we talking about? Because I keep hearing about AI writing code and creating content.
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. We're seeing roles like AI ethics consultants, machine learning trainers, and automation specialists, jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago. And get this, professionals who can effectively use AI tools are commanding 20 to 30% higher salaries than their peers.
So you're saying the key is to adapt rather than resist? How exactly should people be preparing for this shift?
Let me break this down into 5 essential skills. First, AI literacy. You don't need to code, but understanding how to use AI tools is becoming as crucial as knowing Microsoft Office was in the 90s. Second, emotional intelligence. Something AI simply can't replicate.
That makes sense. But what about the other skills? I'm particularly interested in what might not be obvious.
The third is critical thinking and complex problem solving. AI can give you data, but you need to know how to interpret it. Fourth is digital adaptability. And fifth, which might surprise you, is creativity combined with technical understanding. I recently saw a marketing team use AI to generate hundreds of campaign ideas, but it took human creativity to recognize which ones would actually resonate.
Well, that's a relief for creative professionals. But what about industries where automation is already happening?
Here's something unexpected. Manufacturing workers who were worried about robots are now becoming robot operators and maintenance technicians. The jobs aren't disappearing, they're evolving, and many are paying better than before.
That's fascinating. How are companies handling this transition?
Companies are actually investing more in human skills than ever before. They're finding that as AI handles routine tasks, they need people with stronger soft skills, leadership, communication, and creative problem solving. Some are even paying for employees to learn these new skills.
So what's your advice for someone who's worried about their job security right now?
Start small. Spend 30 minutes a day experimenting with AI tools in your current work. Identify repetitive tasks that take up your time and research AI tools that could help. The goal isn't to replace yourself, but to enhance your capabilities.
That's much more manageable than trying to completely reinvent yourself overnight. Any specific tools you'd recommend starting with?
ChatGPT for brainstorming, Grammarly for writing, and industry-specific AI tools are great starting points. But here's the key. Focus on understanding how these tools can enhance your work rather than replace it. Think of AI as a very capable intern who needs constant supervision and direction.
That's actually a really helpful way to think about it. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Remember this. Throughout history, every major technological revolution has created more jobs than it eliminated. The key is being on the right side of that change. Instead of resisting AI, become someone who knows how to leverage it effectively. The future belongs to those who can work alongside AI, not those who try to compete with it.
That certainly helps put things in perspective. Thank you for this enlightening discussion about AI and the future of work.
And remember everyone, stay curious, keep learning, and don't let the robots outsmart you. The future is about human plus machine, not human versus machine.
Topic 5. How to use ChatGPT to study smarter, not harder.
Studies show that 87% of students are using AI tools for studying already. But here's the shocking part. Most of them are doing it completely wrong.
Well, that's a concerning statistic. How exactly are they misusing these tools?
You know, it's fascinating. Many students treat AI like a shortcut instead of what it really is. A powerful learning assistant that can transform how we process and understand information.
So it's kind of like having a tutor in your pocket, but only if you use it the right way?
Exactly that. And here's what's really interesting. Research shows students who use AI tools properly actually retain information better because they're engaging with the material in multiple ways.
Could you break down exactly how students should be using these tools effectively?
Well, there are 5 main strategies that have been proven to work. The first is using AI to break down complex topics into simpler terms. Think of it like having a translator for academic jargon.
That makes sense. I remember struggling with some incredibly dense academic papers in college.
Right. And that leads to the second strategy, using AI to create study roadmaps. Instead of getting overwhelmed by a 50-page research paper, you can get an intelligent overview first.
But how do you make sure students don't just stop at the overview?
That's where the real skill comes in. You use the AI-generated summary as a framework for deeper reading. Studies show this actually improves comprehension by up to 40%.
Oh, wow. That's a significant improvement. What's the third strategy?
The third approach is using AI for essay planning and structure. But here's the key. It's about organizing thoughts, not generating content. Think of it like having a writing coach who helps you outline your ideas.
That seems like it could really help with writer's block. What about test preparation?
That's actually the fourth strategy, using AI to create custom practice materials. Research shows that personalized quizzes can improve test scores by up to 23%.
How exactly does that work in practice?
Well, you feed your study material into ChatGPT and ask it to generate different types of questions, multiple choice, short answer, even scenario-based problems. The key is using these as practice, not shortcuts.
And what's the fifth strategy?
The fifth is using AI as a learning companion for active recall. You can have it challenge your understanding, pose counter-arguments, and help you identify gaps in your knowledge.
That sounds powerful, but I imagine there are some serious pitfalls to avoid.
Oh, absolutely. And here's a startling fact. 62% of professors report catching AI-generated assignments in the past year. The detection technology is getting incredibly sophisticated.
So what's the right way to incorporate these tools?
Think of it like this. AI should enhance your learning process, not replace it. Studies show students who use AI for understanding rather than shortcuts see a 35% improvement in their grades.
Could you walk us through what an ideal AI-assisted study session looks like?
Let's say you're studying World War II. You might start by having AI create a timeline of key events, then generate questions about each major battle or decision point.
And then verify everything with your actual course materials?
Exactly. And here's what's fascinating. Research shows this multi-step approach leads to 45% better information retention compared to traditional study methods.
That's really impressive. Any final advice for students wanting to try this approach?
Start with our 7-day challenge. Use one AI study technique each day, but always cross-reference with your course materials. The data shows students who follow this method see improvements within just 1 week.
This has been incredibly enlightening. It really changes how we should think about AI in education.
And remember, it's not about replacing traditional studying, it's about enhancing it. When used correctly, AI tools can make learning more efficient, effective, and actually more enjoyable.
Topic 6. Google versus AI. Is searching for information dead?
Search engines as we know them might be dead. A shocking new study shows that 70% of Google results are now just paid ads, while AI tools are delivering answers 70% faster than traditional search.
You know what's fascinating about that statistic is how dramatically things have shifted. Just this morning, I spent 15 minutes trying to find a simple recipe, scrolling past endless ads and stories.
The transformation of search has been pretty incredible. Remember when Google first appeared? It was this clean, simple interface where you typed a question and got relevant answers. Now it feels like we're playing digital hide-and-seek with actual information.
That really makes me wonder, what exactly changed to make search so cluttered?
Well, it all comes down to the rise of SEO and digital marketing. Websites started optimizing content for algorithms rather than humans. Instead of focusing on providing helpful information, they're competing to reach the top of search results at any cost.
The way these AI tools are disrupting this model is fascinating, though. They're completely changing how we interact with information.
Here's what makes AI search so revolutionary. Instead of giving us a list of links to sort through, it analyzes massive amounts of data to provide direct, contextual answers. A recent study showed AI can understand complex queries with 85% more accuracy than traditional search engines.
Though I have to wonder about the reliability of these AI responses, especially when we hear about these hallucinations they can have.
That's actually one of the most interesting challenges we're facing. While AI can process information incredibly fast, it sometimes generates plausible-sounding but incorrect information. For example, one study found that AI responses contained verifiable errors in about 20% of complex queries.
So we're essentially trading speed and convenience for potential accuracy issues?
Well, it's more nuanced than that. Think of it like having a brilliant but occasionally overconfident research assistant. They can quickly summarize complex topics and make connections you might miss, but you still need to verify their work.
The implications for education and research must be enormous. How are universities and businesses adapting to these changes?
Many institutions are developing hybrid approaches. For instance, Harvard Business School now teaches students to use AI for initial research while emphasizing the importance of verification through traditional academic sources. They've found this combination can reduce research time by 60% while maintaining accuracy.
That's such an interesting approach, using the strengths of both systems rather than choosing one over the other.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Google isn't just watching from the sidelines. They're integrating AI features into their search engine, with early tests showing a 40% improvement in answer relevancy.
The competition between these technologies must be driving incredible innovation.
It absolutely is. We're seeing new tools emerge that combine the best of both worlds. For example, some platforms now provide AI-generated answers while simultaneously citing sources and providing links for verification, addressing both speed and accuracy concerns.
The future of search seems to be moving toward a more intelligent, integrated approach.
And that's really the key takeaway here. The future isn't about choosing between Google or AI. It's about understanding how to use both effectively. Studies show that people who combine both tools are 45% more likely to find accurate information quickly.
What advice would you give to someone trying to navigate this changing landscape?
Start by using AI for broad understanding and initial research. It's great for getting the big picture and identifying key concepts. Then use traditional search engines to verify specific facts and find primary sources. This approach has been shown to reduce research time by 50% while maintaining high accuracy.
That makes so much sense, using each tool for what it does best.
Looking ahead, we're likely to see even more integration between these technologies. Companies are already developing tools that combine AI's analytical capabilities with traditional search engines' vast databases and real-time updates.
The way these technologies complement each other really is remarkable.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about regarding the future of search and information gathering. The key is staying adaptable and developing critical thinking skills to evaluate different sources effectively.
And remembering that these tools will continue to evolve, making our ability to find and process information even better in the future.
All right, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more tips to improve your English. And hey, if you want to take your learning to the next level, check out the books I've linked in the description. These are some of the best resources to boost your vocabulary, grammar, and confidence in English. Blast off!